Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome into another edition of Infection Podcast, where we talk about the intersection of video games and politics. Very odd mix. Hopefully you had a nice 4th of July. My name is Nick Craig. You can give me a follow on Twitter at Nicholas M. Craig, and check out our website, infectionpodcast.com. Ringing in the Freedom Train with the nice 4th of July overlay over the We the People background. Brian with an I, Aldridge. How's it going, Brian?
Going well, and hopefully everybody had a good 4th of July. We're 1 day late for our show because of it, and took some time to celebrate. If you want to find me at Boise Computer on Twitter or at Brian Aldridge on Gab, Getter, or Truth Social. So
I know that your background is the We the People.
Yes.
That's the Constitution. But I did see yesterday for 4th of July, they have this big thing here. It's the official North Carolina 4th of July festival. It's in a little town called Southport. And there was a guy that was dressed up like John Adams era. And he did a reading of the Declaration of Independence. And obviously I've read through it before. And we know various parts of it, but to see somebody dressed up as it, reading it, the whole thing at that time, it was interesting. So I'm sure there's videos on YouTube of the same thing, but I'd highly recommend you watch like somebody read it in that context. It just, I don't know, it hits differently when somebody's dressed up and reading it like that. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we had one of our friends that we invited over last night to come bring their kids and their wife and do some fireworks at our house. He has a tradition of, he always reads that on the 4th of July.
Oh, that's awesome.
So they have a party, so he'll pull it out, and just every 4th of July, he reads it out loud. So before we set out fireworks, he read it, the whole thing, and off we went.
Yeah, it was cool. I've never heard somebody else actually read it before, and that was pretty neat. So sorry to all
that was
of
one
our
of the first when we started to hang out with him, a number of years ago. First time he did it, that was the first time I've ever seen anybody do it as well. So
sorry to all of our non-American listeners, but freedom, suck on.
The Brits are bitter at this moment.
Well, they are. Yeah. Well, they can continue putting their beans on toast and continuing using the metric system. They can freaking have at it. All right, Brian. Well, you hate to be right about something. There's certain things you don't want to be right about. I do this a lot in my day job. There's things that I'm like, guys, this is gonna. I don't want to be right, but this is what's gonna happen. And specifically looking at the status of the gaming economy. Before we get into some layoffs, we talked about E3 last week, how they were going to be making some changes there. But it turns out that in 2021, when they did their kind of hybrid E3, which wasn't really a full E3, it was the first one after COVID, somehow ESA, the parent organization, lost nearly $4 million. That's a lot.
And I mean, a lot of that is wages. I mean, they're still paying people.
Well, the president's making $1.5 million a year. I mean,
and they're not bringing in a huge amount of income from an all digital, because the ticket sales and the booths and all that's what makes the money. And when you're telling a company, hey, well, we'll let you stream on one of our channels, pay us, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 more to do that. No, I think they were kind of in that let's survive and try to make it look like we're still doing something. But as you see, that's a lot of money lost. I wonder if they had to, does it say here that they had to pay for anything for canceling the show floor? Did that cost them anything?
So they paid about $4 million to this agency for trade show management. So I don't know if that was already locked in. They spent, and this seems, I know streaming is expensive. I'm not trying to indicate that it's not, but it seems like they got maybe hosed a little bit with this Game Cloud Network company that was providing their video CDN, because they spent $1.6 million on streaming, which I know E3 is popular and all, but there's not a chance in hell they actually needed to spend
use that much
1.6 on video CDN. That's nuts. I mean, that's
perhaps they should have partnered with Microsoft or somebody who has all these data centers, that Twitch, somebody to be able to provide a platform to stream on that would have not cost them hardly anything and a little bit of promotion. Because if they would have streamed this on Twitch, that would have been
well, they did.
Well, Amazon, but that would have been all they needed, because they that hosts everything. I mean, it would have been some, I'm sure, hardware and connections and things like that, but not $1.6 million worth.
Yeah. So turns out the online event did not, and here's the problem with it. When you do an in-person trade show, especially like this in LA with everything that's associated, and let's be honest, because I saw a lot of people commenting about how the ESA president's making, this egregious amount of money. The video game industry is like $100 billion industry in just in the United States. So this guy's job is to advocate for essentially the video game industry, which, is $100 billion industry. So with the context there, I don't think his salary is the reason that they lost on all this money, but you have to change your model, your pitch, the way that you handle these online events, because they're not the trade show where you've got the cash flowing in from the tickets and the vendor booths and all of these steady sources of income. You don't have that on an online event. You have just sponsors, if that, very little other income. So you can't spend $4 million on trade show management. You can't spend $2 million. That money's a lot, but in the grand scheme of a big show, it's not. Like, you look at a show like CES, $2 million for CES is nothing. That show costs them hundreds of millions of dollars to put on. It's
the giant screens and everything involved is a huge cost.
They rent out the whole
city
of Las Vegas. For a week. You're talking about a major event. But this stuff has to shift if they're going to try and ever do this as a successful online event. And the reality is, it shouldn't have to cost this much anyway.
No, and I didn't really watch that much with the digital. I don't know how much production they actually put into the show itself. I saw clips and pieces turned into YouTube videos. So I don't know if 3.9 million to this trade show management is something that's ridiculous. I mean, did they put in a lot of work to make it feel like an online trade show where there was a lot of choreographing and getting people to stand in the right places? And I didn't see whether or not that's how it happened. So, but still, these numbers are when you are managing a lot of people in a place that's got a lot going on. If it's all online, there couldn't have been that much going on.
No.
You're not dealing with massive crowds lining up into a theater and tickets and all this. You're dealing with digital. People showing up, sitting in front of a screen and watching a presentation. So hopefully this doesn't, because you had your prediction. I'm kind of worried that this is going to hurt your prediction going forward of them going all digital when they lost so much money doing digital.
Well, they will go all digital, but it will be... They're just going to have to make it.
Yeah.
Well, they just have to make it. It doesn't need to cost you $25 million to put on a streaming event. You should be able to do that a whole lot cheaper. So yeah, that's that.
All right. Well, we'll see where that goes. And part of it is the loss of the economy and the industry of video games is just crumbling right now. It's falling apart. How many weeks in a row have we talked about layoffs with companies that, not just the small companies, ones that are very well known, that are still putting out titles, yet they're still having to lay off people. There was an article I found from gamesindustry.biz that goes through, why do game media layoffs keep happening? It says, redundancies are not uncommon, but the pace at which this is happening in games media is swelling. They talk about Elden Ring as one where there was a lot of traffic and hype when it first came out. But not all titles are like that, especially right now. People are picking and choosing which title is going to be the one they spend their money on. That's something we've been saying for many months now. And it's really being seen because, sure, this could be a game that back when the economy is great, when things are going well, people would put out the $50, $60, $70 to get it. Hey, Donnie PC, thank you for the subscription. They'd put out that money. They'd put out that money just to see if the game is good and risk it being a dud, and at least play through part of it. It seems like now they're being more decisive and not spending that money. And so these titles that usually would get a lot of those extra purchases are no longer getting it.
Sure.
So that's really hurting. And who knows how, we've talked also about AI, and we've got some interesting things coming up with AI layoffs that are happening as well. Some of the game industry that are well, first of all, game investments has hit a 4-year low in Q1 of this year. So this
Game
is something where
investments. This is from the developer side?
yes, so
Okay.
putting money into the studios and things like that. So total game industry investments for the first quarter of 2023 amounted to 755 million, which is down 41% from the fourth quarter of 2022 and down 78% from last year's first quarter. I mean, just look at that graph. Of course, there was a big boom. Everybody was thinking, oh, COVID, everybody's going to sit inside and play video games. So they dumped all this money into the industry and realized, oh, COVID's kind of passed and everybody's going outside again. And just look at the way that it's gone back down. Now, it's not that I think now it's back to normal, more normal, because look at how artificial of a spike that was when it came to certain games. I mean, browser games, just what's up with that? Look at that's hundreds of millions of dollars in investment in browser games, which in 2022 went back to normal.
Yeah.
There was a spike of them in 2019, probably because of tech and the ability to finally do it right. But 2022 went back to the same numbers as 2020. 2021 was, I think, way artificially high. And then the other ones were, a little bit bigger than 2020. But 2019, that's closer to normal. 2017, 2018, 2019, they're all very similar numbers. And before that, the numbers are fairly small. So I don't think 2021 is a good way to measure how this industry should be, because look at how artificial of a spike and COVID really affected what they thought was going to happen. Well, I thought do you think it was because they think they were going to stay inside longer? I mean, COVID was going to last for 10 years, so let's get everybody to be entertained in their homes.
Anybody that, well, yes, that's what they did think. But anybody that has ever looked at a chart before in their life would look at this and go, obviously 2021 is an anomaly, right? That's not.
That's an outlier for sure.
It's big time an outlier, but there's some other interesting stuff in here too. Look at this, look at this big jump from 2016 to 2017. That's when you had and that's when you had the new consoles coming out. The new Xbox and the PlayStation.
And Trump was
5.
elected, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you could.
I'm not saying that was it, but
yeah,
we have a good economy though. I mean, we went from a lousy economy to a good economy,
for sure. So you could see that there. Yeah, I'm not surprised that 2023 is going to look like that, and it probably will end looking somewhere around 2015 or 2013.
Well, actually, that's MCG. What is that? What is MCG? MCG.
Microtransaction cash games.
I'm trying to see what I'm trying to find where, because I was looking at the yellow, because the yellows are similar to me, and I was looking at the wrong one. I realized MCG games is something else that I'm not seeing. Let's see, MCG. And they don't mention that anywhere in the article.
That's what you just heard with that little window noise. Just me doing a Control F for that term.
Yeah, I did it at the exact same moment, so I figured it was me, and I was like, I don't remember having sounds on for that.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
MCG game market.
Nevertheless,
multicultural game. Is that what it is? Mafia culture game. Monster City game. There's a lot of MCGs in
Monster. Hold on a second. Hold on. Stop. Are you going to try and sit here right now and on this podcast, the day after America's birthday, you're going to try and convince me that this chart right here, this huge yellow, is mafia cultured games? Do I look like an idiot to you?
Figure out what MCG. Let's see, MCG game investments.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
I'm not even seeing what that means. Like, so the biggest thing that we see is something that they don't even mention in the article. It's what, almost 50%. It's like 50% of that year's investment.
It's got to be mobile something gaming. Well, there's already a mobile.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
There is a mobile. It doesn't make
yeah,
any sense. Like, what is making up for half of that year's
mobile
investment?
cloud gaming, mobile it's got to be
Maybe
mobile.
cloud gaming. Yeah, it's
Mobile
got to be cloud gaming.
something like that. But even that spike doesn't make. Nevertheless, let's move on. We'll sit here all day. But you're going to see a
multiplayer cloud gaming. That's what it is. Multiplayer cloud gaming.
Brian,
who would have invested into that? Would that have been Google with the
Stadia?
With their device, with the Stadia.
Stadia, they did
GeForce was doing theirs.
They did all those investments. Well before
Microsoft has their clouding. I bet all of those together were probably making up.
It was too late in 2021 for all those investments to be coming in. Stadia was already done by 2021.
Yeah, I don't what in the world with multiplayer cloud gaming,
mobile co-ops. I'm not sure. It's definitely something cloud. I would be sure. Nevertheless, 2023 is going to be a 2023 is going to be a rough year, gaming wise.
Yeah.
And, not just gaming wise. I mean, let's face it. The entire freaking economy is going to be really, really tough. So you're seeing it there, and you're seeing it in terms of layoffs in the gaming industry also, correct?
Yeah, BioWare. So they're handing off that, so Star Wars: The Old Republic, which is an older game that they've been redoing. They're laying off people because they're going to be sending that to a new developer, because that's EA Studio, and they want to just focus on Mass Effect and Dragon Age going forward. And so they're taking Star Wars: The Old Republic, pushing it off somewhere else, and so they're letting that staff go, which is kind of a surprise because that's a game that's, I think a lot of people are anticipating. There's a lot of people that love that game back in the day, and I think those kind of games do make money because the people my age who played them when they were younger turn around and think, well, hey, this would be fun to play a remastered version that feels more modern, so I can go, because there's a lot of story there that's already written, but they must be wanting to cut back, and they're going to cut back to the things that they know make money. Dragon Age, they know they make money on it. Mass Effect, they know they make money on it. The rest of it's kind of a wild card, and I think they're trying to avoid that. One that I saw that was kind of unexpected is, you know who Niantic is?
Yeah, Niantic. They're the Pokemon Go people.
Yeah, they do Pokemon Go, and they do some other games that are variations of that, different skinned versions of that
kind of stuff.
Augmented reality, and so that they're laying off 230. They've closed their LA office, and they're laying off 230 people there because there was a number of ones. One was on Google Plus. They had some variation of it that used to do, but yeah, there was a number of these that are all linked to this company. So if that's going to shutter or eventually kind of wind that down, we'll see. Because I think that didn't really take off. One thing that probably hurt it a lot was COVID, because the boom started happening right before COVID, when people were going outside and doing these events and trying to capture whatever, and then all of a sudden COVID hit and they weren't supposed to go outside anymore. So I think that did affect them. They haven't recovered from that. Daedalic is halting all internal game development and laying off 25 people there. They are the ones who just released the new Lord of the Rings game, Lord of the Rings Gollum, which did not have the fanfare that I think they were hoping for. There was a lot of people were very disappointed in how the game came out, the bugginess of the game, and so they are canceling a second game from that and halting development. So who knows? That's an example of people not purchasing it, being more picky with their money. Tiny Build, who we spoke with at PAX, did some demos, got some keys, things like that. Their stocks, according to Games Industry, is taking a dive in 2023 quarter one, or half one, I think they're treating it as, and it's because they perform below expectations, which it's not. Maybe not below expectations. I mean, that's kind of been our expectation all year. Just looking at, and at the end of last year, with looking at the economy, these games are not selling, especially these small ones that don't hold your attention for long periods of time. People aren't getting the $10, $20, $15 games even. The ones that are made to be, quick, smaller games that you don't play as long. So that's something, sad for them, because there's a lot of good developers and people that are linked to those companies. But they're definitely they're having to let people go, because otherwise they're going to have to shut down the whole company eventually if they're not bringing in money. One company that's actually defying all this is surprising. Of course, they're not in the United States. Is NetEase, and NetEase is one of the Chinese
I'm
companies.
sure they're
Imagine
doing
that.
great.
Yeah, I mean, they've been buying up all of these companies as they struggle, and investing in companies that need money, really getting rooted into the industry. And this for me is kind of scary because we've seen how they affect how games are developed. As soon as China comes in and gets their claws into your studio, into your game, they start making demands and expectations. And as we saw with H1Z1, that really, really hurt their company. So this one, they've made some smart investments, and when you look at theirs, they're up 80% to a 1-year high. So you look at they're at 160 Hong Kong dollars. I assume that'd be, was that billion or something, or million? I'm not sure how their dollar works. But they're doing really well, and they've since October have been just climbing and climbing of last year.
But hold on a second. I'm not. Well, actually, I am going to argue this with you. China's economy right now is woefully inflated. Now, I know ours is too, but their economy is on the brinks of a catastrophic failure. I mean, there are some people, and take it for what it's worth. These people, legitimate, or are they just crazy? Like crackpot guys, on their crazy ideas. But there are some folks that believe that China's economy is going to completely collapse, and that country is going to, not cease to exist, but is essentially going to crumble because of that. I mean,
it's going to be sad for the people inside of it because they're the ones affected heavily.
I think it's important to note whenever you're looking at any sort of stock growth in China that the context there is how things are just they're very, very they're just weird. And I know NetEase is traded in the United States.
They've done a lot of investing outside of China, which I think has kind of helped them a bit because China was so restrictive. When China became so restrictive, which we'd have to see the timing of October. Is that when they finally were less restrictive? Because all of a sudden they started approving again. I would assume it was probably around October when they finally said, all right, we're going to start approving people again. But they did a lot of investing at that time in studios outside of the country, in the United States and over in Europe. So I think that they have divested, not by choice, but because they had to. Otherwise, China, if they wouldn't have let off that restriction, would have taken that whole company down with them, and it would have ceased to exist or seriously crippled them.
Now, investing and buying in these companies are great, but most of the time it's not a one lump sum thing, and it's longer term payments and things of that nature. And the question's going to be when the call comes, will there be the money there to make those payments? Kind of the same issue that the United States dealt with a couple of months ago with the debt ceiling situation. So I always want to kind of put that little disclaimer whenever you're talking about the Chinese economy, because it is, first of all, a lot of it is inflated in BS, if we're being honest. Then other parts of it are just really, really hard to look at long term because, Brian, I'm going to give you $100 million over the next 80 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Hopefully I have that money in 80 years to continue to make the payments.
And I'm now that, hey, look, I'm worth $180 million.
Exactly. Well, exactly. That's what you are worth, and hopefully I can make those payments. And that's the issue. That's always the problem. And I just do not trust, and rightfully so, the Chinese government and their economy is just in
from their track record as well.
Yeah,
they have a history of not being truthful.
They're in a rough shape. So that's that is all.
Well, another country that's been purchasing a lot is Saudi Arabia. And one thing I keep hearing
baby.
is
Keep drilling.
Saudi Arabia investing. They now own 10% of EA. So
yeah, man,
that's a pretty significant stake. Now, I don't hear about them trying to be super restrictive like China is. I think they're more concerned about the money. Of course, now what the fun thing is whenever certain things are posted to their version of Twitter or online social media, how certain aspects of characters and certain people of certain demographics aren't shown in those images a lot of times in the Arabian areas. And people call out these companies that are so diverse and talking about how, everybody's equal and all this. But of course, when you're dealing with here, just because they have such a large stake, you're willing to compromise your morals for that.
Yes, it's mostly a religion thing. It's a lot of the restrictiveness comes from their Muslim faith.
Yeah, and so they'll actually restrict those things from being posted, but they're very, very picky about it.
I mean, it's completely unrelated to what we're talking about in terms of video games, but I'm sure you tracked it. I know you're not a sports guy, but I'm sure you tracked a little bit what went on between the Live Golf and the PGA and how.
No, I didn't hear about this. What happened?
You don't know about this at all? Okay. I'm probably going to, there's probably a couple golf fans listening that are going to be triggered. So already I'll apologize. But essentially, Saudi Arabia started this league up called Live, L-I-V, and they were going after these major PGA golfers, recruiting them to partake in the Live League, and were paying them, giving them $100 million plus contracts to come golf with Live. They poached all of these good golfers, and it's different. PGA is a lot more buttoned up. It's not as loose and relaxed. A much more traditional thing. Live, on the other hand, was just people like partying at the holes and everything. It was just a very different thing.
The lingerie football league they used to have back in the 90s.
It's not quite that bad, but
not quite that far.
It was just much more of a casual. Like some of the golfers would wear shorts. Not everybody was wearing long pants, and
less of the rules and the tradition.
Yeah, exactly. And, the country club style golfer was kind of a spit in the face on that. Well, they essentially poached all of the good PGA golfers, and then Live and the PGA merged. This happened about probably 2 months ago. And this was a year after the president of PGA said that, Live is just funded on, oil money and the blood of all this other stuff. And then 1 year later, he's shaking the guy's hand and they're merging their two leagues together.
Saying he's a great guy.
But now, why is that? And here's the thing. Saudi Arabia has got all of this money, all of this, since we don't buy, nobody wants to buy oil from Russia unless you're Russia or from Russia unless you're China, essentially, or some parts of Eastern Europe. Saudi Arabia's just loaded. And they've got money to spend, and they're influencing Western culture. Now, is that for good or for bad? I don't know that we've seen the more authoritarian side of things in terms of what China does. When they influence culture, it's pretty significant. With Live Golf, wasn't like that at all. Women were allowed to attend the events. I mean, it wasn't like a weird, and all the events weren't in Saudi Arabia. I mean, they were all over all over the world. It's going to be interesting to see what they do. And depending on what they do with this.
That's what I found interesting about Saudi Arabia is when it comes to the companies that they purchase, I haven't seen them drastically change them. They seem to let them continue operating in the way that they were operating for the most part. And, if there are any influences that are happening that change how decisions are made or how the product is put out, I haven't seen those from these particular companies because EA seems to be making games now. Whether I know they're not the ones influencing, a lot of the LGBTQ because these companies are still pushing that hard, even though they have a huge percentage held by Saudi Arabia. So they can't really be pushing that hard. I think their main concern is they just want to make money, because that's a lot of what Saudi Arabia is about because of the oil industry. If that's what they're about, then I'm fine with that. It's when, like with China, we see so many times they come in and start influencing and changing the game and saying you can do this, you can't do that. China has a track record of it with the movie industry, the video game industry, you name it. For someone to make a movie, look what they do with the NBA. The NBA goes over there and everybody's standing and saluting the Chinese flag, but then they come back to the United States and then they'll kneel for the United States flag. It's kind of odd how much, but it comes down to money. They know to make those big dollars that China's offering in them, they have to play by those rules where then they come to the United States, they can do whatever they want. Because we have short memories, I guess.
Oh, we absolutely do. That is very accurate. So,
all right.
Yeah, that's kind of what's going on in terms of the broader gaming economy right now. And again, as I preface the segment, you hate to be right in about this stuff, but Brian, I say that we're probably one of the earliest to really kind of
We've been
peg
saying
this
it, yeah.
thing and point out that there could be some serious issues here.
Oh yeah.
So
Well, here let's roll on to some AI things, because
AI, we love AI.
Unity, Unity, they rolled out some AI tools here. I think it was about a week ago, and they had AI tools and marketplace for game developers that included content creation tools. One was called Unity Muse, which was a runtime engine interface for and they had a runtime engine interface called Unity Centis. So these are two products that they rolled out that are supposed to really bring AI. They have a video. I don't know. I think the video shows some things with the AI. I don't know. I'll put a link of it in the show notes for people to see. I don't know. Do you want to try pulling it up? Do you have access to that?
Mm-hmm.
I'll put it underneath of this so that people can see. But this is their video announcing that, because this is going to be a big part of developing. I've heard predictions that programmers aren't going to be needed here in 5 years. So take that and kind of put this in your thoughts as you watch this.
So this is just this is kind of what we saw a couple months ago in a demo of this just AI generated face and the movement
morphing of face. Matching, either generating the voice or matching the face to your voice input.
Yeah, pretty neat.
And, it saves a lot of time for animators. It makes it to where these things that are time consuming or you need a special person to do it, you don't need that anymore. AI can spit this stuff out and make it to where those things are almost instant. I know that this is something that Epic has done as well, putting out a product that with that metahuman will sit there and morph their faces and talk. And we showed that, I think, a number of weeks ago. So this is their answer to that. And it looks realistic enough, I think, for, it's using most likely a webcam or something to read your face and then make it look like a person that's actually talking. So if you're listening, go check out the video. We'll have a link of it in the show notes. Now, here's the problem. Here, let's see, how many days ago was this? This was on the 29th, so I think it was 2 days later. They then have dropped their AI partner after accusations it stole assets. So this is, this isn't all AI of their
asset. Yeah.
So they still have some AI things that they're putting out, but this is part of that, where it was supposed to be, this Atlas 3D asset creator was all part of this AI push, and they had to pull it down, I think 2 days after they announced it on their Unity Asset Store. Now, this is something that we've talked about this before with Epic's game store, or their Unreal Marketplace, because there have been ones that they've had to take down because people steal assets from other packs and sell them. It's very difficult for them to really monitor and catch these. Now, that's where they could use AI, is to document all the other asset packs and find ones where they've kind of, because a lot of times sound packs, they'll go and change or merge sounds and say, hey, these are unique sounds, sell those. They'll take assets and slightly change them. But this is something where you purchase an asset, you find out that they have then pretty much stolen them from some other pack. No longer have a legal license to that. But you've made a game, you're selling that game, that creates a huge legal problem for any game developer. Like, this is something that when you buy or you're selling asset packs like this is a huge liability, because you can instantly lose your graphics, your sound, animations, because of this pack not being legitimate.
And not only does it potentially open you to some legal challenges, which I'm sure you could work your way out of, might be expensive, but you're also out the money that you spent on these packs, because in some cases you may have invested significant amounts of money into some of these quote unquote they are assets, these assets for them to be essentially ripoffs or stolen. So you're kind of taking it from both angles there. Not only is the product you're producing potentially illegal, but you also paid for it. Now you're getting shafted. So I mean, you're you're in a terrible position.
And all the
That
time,
sucks.
let's say you take them and customize them, and it takes a lot of time to implement them or make them the way that you want them to be, because you can't then use any of that. You have to start over from scratch if you're gonna fix it and re-release your game with the updated assets that you have come up with or legally purchased to replace the stolen ones. Then you have to also pay for all that time to implement them, adjust them, make them how you want them to be. And so, this is a big thing. So we'll see if this is something that continues to happen. I would hope that Unity, Epic are sitting there and working hard to come up with a way that this can be automated, because it's not fair to the person that the assets were stolen from. It's not fair to the person who thinks they're purchasing legal assets. It's really a scam, and people are falling for a scam, but it's a scam that is endorsed and propped up by these asset stores, unknowingly at the time. So this is something that hurts everybody but one person, the person who made it and got the quick buck. So hopefully they come up with ways to prevent this, and I think it will be AI that solves the problem in the end, because they're relying. The problem with Epic is they're relying on humans looking at the assets and saying, "Oh yeah, this looks like it's legitimate," and doing some whatever checks they're doing on their end to try to see that it's not something stolen. But they don't have access to everything. They don't have they don't know every single sound object that's out there to say, hey, oh, well, this is from this pack. We've shown videos of people who, I think we showed it on the air, but there's a video out there of a sound pack where this guy actually tracks down where they came from, plays them side by side, and said, hey, look, they combined this asset, and this asset together to make this sound, and now they're selling it on the Unreal Store. But that you don't have time to do that when there's more and more submissions every month coming in. They can't keep up. So I think that use AI to catch this stuff, to prevent it, so that you're not relying on a person sitting in a cubicle to look at your asset and make the guess, because that's all it is, a guess that that's your asset that you created.
Okay, Brian, I hear you, and I see you as well. You can watch a video version of the show at infectionpodcast.com, Rumble, and YouTube. I hear you and I see you, but this is the same. I don't know that you've done this yourself. You probably have. But this is the same the same criticism that people give Apple and Epic with, everything is curated and everything is looked at and it's slow. Folks, there's a reason for that. Is what Google Play Store. How many times have we seen in the last couple of months now, Google Play Store, 10,000 apps or 1,000 apps in the store, rampant with malware because Google's not checking anything. Steam, it's a very similar process. Now there's a little bit of QC, but very, very little in terms of what Steam does. You essentially pay the fee and your game goes on there. I don't know that I'm in one camp or the other, but this idea of just flooding the market with other people's crap and reselling it as your own is a serious problem, and it is only going to get exponentially worse unless they can figure out how to manage it.
And it happens at all different kinds of places. It happens,
and it's happened for
video
years.
Games. Yeah, sounds, things, pictures, images. I mean, we've talked about how I had a client who got sued because of a picture of a dog on a vet site that I purchased legally, and then them purchasing the image and then trying to sue people who didn't keep the receipt. There's all kinds of scams happening. And this is kind of one of the new ones just because of the technology, because it used to be there were no stores to really go and buy these assets, or you were purchasing directly from somebody who had a track record of creating images that had a specific look, and you would notice, because they've created hundreds of images, if something was way different than normal. But here you're getting one-offs from people, and how do you verify that? You don't have a history of what they make, but what are you going to assume that they're lying? We haven't seen you before, so you can't submit anything. I mean, they can't do that. So it's kind of a tough position, but they've got to figure it out, because these type of things will destroy the reputation of your product if it keeps happening. And with AI, whether or not this is because of stolen assets that were used to train the AI, whatever it is, that's something I think is going to have to be hammered out in court, because this wasn't a thing before. This is a new problem. And I haven't seen any court cases really deal with it. Japan, we mentioned the last couple of weeks, says they're not going to enforce any of it. So, go ahead and train your AI. We'll see. I don't know. Google, one thing that they put out recently in their terms of services that when you accept that terms of service, they have the right to use all of your things that you put on their products to train their AI. Well, that's a problem.
Is it a problem if it was in their terms of service?
Okay, but what about, so it's terms of service now. What if you haven't logged into your Google Drive account for a couple of years and you haven't accepted it? Are they limiting it to ones that have accepted the new terms of service?
That's the only way a terms of service is enforceable.
Exactly. So that as long as they're going in and only doing it to ones that have logged in, clicked the button, and seen this, sure, that's something. But whatever it is, it's in there. If it's publicly available data, will be used to train BART. Now, I don't think that will include Google Docs. Now, if you publicly share something you have a public folder or something in Google Docs, that will probably then be available. But I think it comes down to your permissions. If you post an image, whatever it is, and you post publicly available, so if someone has the link, they can view it, then I think that allows it to be trained. Which, in a way, that I think that is kind of smart. You're getting it from places, because this is the tough thing that we're running into. How do you train AI without stealing people's content? It almost seems impossible.
It is by definition impossible. I mean,
yeah.
The only way you have AI is with it learning conversation, it learning history, it learning context. The only way it learns context is by taking things that people have posted or made. It could be a very disturbing loop. But in the case of Google, they're probably, would you say they're the top? How do I word this? Do they have like the most user accounts of probably, it's got to be any company, at least in the Western world, with the most amount of accounts?
Like with Gmail
and Google and YouTube.
Facebook has a lot, but I think with the accounts and just straight accounts, I bet you they have higher.
It's got to be Google.
They've been around longer.
Yeah, so let's assume that they have they're number one. With that being the case, I mean, you've got the treasure chest right there. I mean, now you could say, "Well, you own this content." Well, Brian, nothing's free, and so nothing is free. There's no such thing as a free lunch. And
and they're treating it.
Go ahead.
Anything that returns from a Google search, they're considering is trainable for the AI, which that is public. But the problem is, look at all these people that post copywritten information. They'll post it on their own site saying you can read it, but you can't go and post it on your own site. Well, that's kind of a tricky situation, because then when AI is generating things based on your content, they're kind of almost reposting it, because they've been doing tests and they can have it recreate the original document if they do it right with the query.
Yeah.
So that's a problem, because all that information is there and being used, and if you ask the right question, you'll get the original document, which would break copyright. So I think it's, how they have that legislation that protects social media companies from reposted news and litigation and all that. I think they're going to have to come up with something very similar that puts a blanket protection over these AI language models to prevent them from being sued into oblivion, because you could have every single little place suing them if they scrape their data.
Well, let me tell you what, and I'm not an attorney. I pretend to be one on the radio and on this podcast. What has to actually happen here, Brian, is there needs to be a serious legal battle and lawsuit, and we need to see how it goes through on the court system, because until there's legal precedent, it's the Wild West. I don't think legislation.
Right now it is,
I don't think legislation is the answer. And if it is, it'll be the answer. They'll pass legislation 10 years from now, because that's how slowly and stupidly things operate in Washington, D.C. So it's realistically not going to be until somebody with a lot of money sues somebody else with a lot of money, and we figure out what happens. Maybe Epic Apple kind of thing in terms of big, the big battle, the big companies, two major powerhouses, like the Spider-Man meme pointing at each other, like, you stole my content. And it's like, you stole. Well, hold on a second. You also stole my. That's what's going to happen. Until there's a legal precedent, it's going to continue to be the Wild West.
Well, I think certain companies, Valve, for instance, they're blocking games featuring AI-generated assets on Steam because they're worried about copyright law.
How are they doing that?
Well,
They don't have
I
any
mean,
enforcement. We have to check a box, probably.
yeah, you probably have to say, I confirm this, and if you lie about it, then they'd have the right to kick you off of the platform because whatever you agreed to was not truthful. Here's their statement that they put out. We are continuing to learn about AI, the ways it can be used in game development, and how to factor it in our process for reviewing games submitted for distribution on Steam. The introduction of AI can sometimes make it harder to show a developer has sufficient rights in using AI to create assets, including images, text, and music. While developers can use these AI technologies in their work with appropriate commercial licenses, they cannot infringe on existing copyrights. Because one thing that they have said, I think one thing that has been found in the courts is you cannot copyright an AI image. Well, you're putting out a game that you're claiming to copyright the game, right? The contents of the game, but you're putting in things that are uncopyrightable. So I would assume that that's part of the place they're stuck at, is you have a game that you're claiming to have copyright over, but you're putting things in that aren't legally allowed to be copywritten. So that creates a hole in the whole system. They're going to have to come up with somehow sources that are truly legitimate, where they can verify that the sources have been made from, or the way that they've formed the tech is not using anything that's not legal, and then allow them to put in games from that service. But right now, AI is coming from everywhere. I was showing you before things coming from Bing's AI, images that come from there. Bard, Google Bard is just recently, I think, released their image generation and text generation. What about stories and things like that the AI is written that people are using to come up with maybe quests and things for their game? Well, that's not copyrightable because it's referencing other people's copywritten information to generate that story. It's no matter whether it's an image, whether it's text, whether it's an asset that they're creating, those are copyrightable, and I think that's going to be this big battle. How because you need to be able to copyright your game.
Yeah, it's your intellectual property. It's one of the most important things.
Otherwise, is everything going to be free? I mean, if anything has anything AI generated in it, they're not allowed to sell it, but they can release it for totally free on the internet. Who's going to want to do that? I mean, you'll have small ones doing that, but that's not going to be a long-term.
Look, Brian, goal. I had the AI generate a picture of two friends doing a video game podcast. It looks just like you.
Yeah. Which one? Am I the guy on the right or the left?
I don't know. They're both equally.
You're the guy with three. You're the guy with 3 fingers, or the guy with
No, it's not 3 fingers. It's just the rest are kind of curved behind.
Well, look at his right hand.
Okay, enough. Now you're upsetting me.
I just, it creates some pretty amazing things, but definitely your issue. I mean, these guys have no teeth. Why do they think that two friends doing a podcast never have teeth? What are they saying about
losers?
Look at these guys.
Look at these guys.
Yeah. So that's a battle that, sure, they said they can't be copywritten, but that's just opened up more problems. Yeah, I mean, these guys look drunk.
Well, this one is marginally accurate. This is loosely based on our PAX shows.
This is when we do the in-person PAX shows. This is exactly how we look.
Actually, yes, this isn't too far off. So there you go.
So maybe they are accurate. Maybe they took our image.
Yeah, well, now I'm going to have to sue Microsoft.
That's the issue. But that's the issue is if you put something, they're creating something that makes the system break because of the copyright system. And there's no easy way to get around that because the law is very strict about copyright. And so I don't know what they're going to do about it. I'm very interested in watching this over the coming couple of years because this is definitely going to be a battle that reaches the Supreme Court. And they're going to have be some decisions made that are either going to cut back a lot on what AI can do and slow down the growth of it, or they're just going to let it unleash and infringe a lot of people's copyrights and say, hey, well, too bad. We don't want to slow the growth. Yeah. Too much benefit's going to come from this for you to worry about that, which is very possible.
Yeah, but that is the very scary that's the very scary point where it's like, well, hopefully it doesn't get too crazy and out of control, and we'll kind of figure it out. I don't like that. I don't like that. I don't think that's a good approach. I see what
Well,
you're
and this
saying,
is,
but it's
yeah.
I don't like that.
Well, and OpenAI, who makes ChatGPT, they're facing lawsuits as well on how they use people's data.
Well,
This
they're
is
the
not.
worst.
There's not one company that's doing this infraction that's having these issues. They're all having these issues, and so I think that's why they're really doing these in limited tests. One cool thing. So I've been looking at how to do D&D with my boys and kind of show them how it works. So I was testing on Bard, and it can be the game master for you. So there are some really cool uses that I think that to where it knows all the rules. They've programmed in a lot of the 3 campaigns that you can get. It'll track your character, it'll create the scenarios, it'll generate the maps on the fly. Like all the things that we used to do when we're doing our session that we prepare all week for, it's just doing like that. Those are the kind of uses that I think are going to be really cool. The things that you then use for play, the things that you're going to use in business, though, I think that's where the hiccup's going to be, because that's where you can't have these loose ends.
There was a lawyer a couple of weeks ago. We covered it on Computers 2K Now, who used something from ChatGPT in a lawsuit that was completely wrong and got his client in a significant amount of trouble. And then he pulled oh, shucks, man. I had no idea what I was doing with this thing. Oh, wow. That's so crazy. I didn't know.
Some people, that's the problem, is they don't realize that it's not accurate. It's like talking to a person with, some understanding of the topic, but he's supposed to be the expert. The AI is not the expert. Now, if you gave it a very specific rule book and said, I want you to be very specific, tell me if I could do this or not, there's a good chance it might be accurate. But when you're dealing with something as complicated as law, where there are things that they are looking at and deciphering and helping you to understand, it's not always as cut and dry. And so he's trying to make the computer do his job for him, and it came back to bite him. And that's what's going to happen. I think people think that this is going to replace, as I said, they say it's going to replace programming in 5 years. The head of OpenAI claims this. Well, if they can't figure out how to make these things tie up all those loose ends like that, then no, it won't, because the company's not going to risk their whole product crashing and burning or having big issues once load starts hitting the product. They're not going to risk that.
I was using AI. I was using OpenAI specifically for something this past week. I was trying to get a summary of something that I was pretty confident on the timeline and the order of events. But I just wanted to make sure I had it right. And I was like, this is a great example. Instead of reading an article, every time I can find an opportunity to try to use one of these things for something more than just writing a paragraph or writing an email for me, I will. And I asked it about some active litigation and thing that's going on here in my area of the state. And it said disclaimer right away. The first thing was, hey, this thing has not been updated since whatever it is, like July or June of 2020, which is where the OpenAI has stopped with its knowledge base. So it said any other additional things may have changed. And then it spit out the response. So, I mean, it gave me a pretty clear warning that what I was trying to do or what I was looking for, the information could have changed, which I appreciated, because I'm sure a lot of people go into this, create an account on OpenAI, load up ChatGPT, and they don't know that it's been frozen in time. I mean, I don't think unless you're really into it or you know about it that you would know that at all.
Yeah, and that's something who's interested in it and has looked at, how is this working? How do they do it? They're the ones who realize, they locked at this date, the training data goes to here. But your average person who, is maybe a lawyer who doesn't understand tech that well, or somebody who is casually using this thinking this is the greatest invention since sliced bread, isn't going to realize that there are major limitations. And just like the fingers, the fingers in all these AI things are usually, there's not even 5 fingers. You figured they'd be able to program in 5 fingers, but that's not how it works. The AI has trouble with certain details, and those details, just like the glitch in the Matrix. Have you watched the Matrix?
I've seen one, and there's 3, right?
Yeah, the first one. So you know the cat
Yeah, I've seen the
in the first
I've seen the
one, the
first two,
deja
yeah.
vu.
Mhm.
So the deja vu scene, that's how they knew they were in the Matrix, right? That something had changed in the Matrix. And then, when they say that, see that deja vu. Well, in AI, you get that same deja vu when you try to generate certain things. I was generating something and I said, add a microphone to this image. And it puts two microphones, one over here, one over here. They look crazy. There's 7 fingers on one hand and 3 on the other. And, the thing's going nuts. And it's like, well, there's definitely problems with it deciphering what a human is supposed to look like or what normal things look like. But those will be ironed out eventually. Enough training, enough of them figuring out what's causing those things. At some point, they will be indecipherable, and that's when I think the real issues are going to begin. Once you can't tell if something is AI generated or not, then they're going to hit a point where how do you prove that this is stolen? How do you prove that there was copyright infringement?
So I don't disagree with you. And I do think that AI, very similarly to, I think you might be able to draw a lot of analogies for what AI is going to do, is what kind of like what the iPhone did, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
I mean, before the iPhone, yes, you had like weird little Windows handheld PDA devices with edge network connections. I mean, the iPhone really did revolutionize personal computing, the same way that Compaq and some of these other companies did when they were essentially ripping off IBM. So all of that to say, I think, Brian, they've made the same argument about photo manipulation for, at this point, decades. I mean, early versions of, God, who made Photoshop originally before Adobe bought it? Was it Corel? It was some company.
Well, they had another.
That's Paint Shop Pro. That's Corel. But whoever made Photoshop's been around in some part since the 90s. And it's gotten so much more advanced over the years.
It was made by Thomas and John Knoll. So it was 2 American brothers who made it, and then they sold it to Adobe in 1988.
Okay. So 88. Yeah. So let's go back to, let's say, the mid 90s, since people knew what it was and were using photo manipulation tools. You still, though, can look at an image, some, not all. You can still look at an image even 30 years after essentially people started using photo manipulation applications and still say, well, obviously that's manipulated. Now, obviously, you watch television, you look at ads in magazines or see pictures on billboards. All of that stuff is photoshopped, but you know that it's photoshopped. Like, you just inherently know. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out with AI, because now you've seen it more with video, right? In the last, we'll call it the last decade and a half or so, where CGI was only possible. You look at the original Jurassic Park, or you look at Jurassic Park and the CGI and how amazing that was. Now a lot of that stuff can be done on the fly, and it's a lot more accessible. Has it gotten rid of photographers? Has it gotten rid of, people still pay wedding photographers? They could have somebody run around with their iPhone, but they're still paying photographers. They're still getting their photos retouched. They're still doing photo shoots with actual photographers. So I don't know. I mean, yes, can it generate a picture of 2 guys doing a podcast? Yes, it can. But who cares? That's not a thing that I would be doing anyway. Like, if I would take a picture of you and I sitting here, Brian, I don't need to generate that in AI. So I think it's just going to change, because just like the OpenAI guy said, saying that supposedly there won't be any programmers in 5 years. No, it will just change how it happens. There will still be the need for people to do a lot of these things. The industry will adjust slightly, but just like when they started selling MP3s and doing all this, it didn't kill whole industries like they claimed it was. They were claiming that internet sharing of music was going to kill the whole industry, the music industry, the video game, or the movie industry. It's just changed how it works. You can now stream on, and it created to where there were these subscription services for music, and people aren't buying CDs anymore. Well, sure, if your whole thing is standing on the hill saying, well, you need to buy my CD, well, then you might be lonely, because the way that the media is purchased and consumed has changed, and the whole industry has changed with it. And it's ended up creating more jobs in the end, not taking away jobs. So I think that is something where don't be so doom and gloom and worry that
AI is going to make it to where people can't have jobs anymore, because that's kind of the concern that people have been raising for years. AI is going to make it to where there's no point, there's no low skill jobs to do anymore because it's all going to be taken over. Well, I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think just like all the other instances where this has happened in the past, it's only going to change it. And usually it's, in the end, always benefited the industry and made it grow by force. Because when you don't push them in this way, they get stagnant, just like a music industry with CDs. They could have continued doing that. Sure, they could get really high quality versions of audio from a CD. What would be the point of upgrading other than more space? Well, no, the streaming thing is pretty nice, right? It didn't kill the industry. It just changed how you consume it. And I think this is going to be changing the way that you create things, but not killing that you are actually the one creating them. But still, they have to figure out all the legal issues to make it actually work.
Yeah. So that's kind of where we stand right now. All right, Brian, we are up to about an hour or so. Anything else before we get out of here?
Well, next week we'll have some other things, because there's more of the doom and gloom people that have been talking about some of these things. Some really interesting other topics with AI and how it's affecting writers is really big, and we'll cover that next week as well. But yeah, if you want to find me, are we going to roll on out of here?
Yeah.
Okay. At Boise Computer on Twitter, or at Brian Aldridge on Gab, Getter, or Truth Social. You can go check out my blog, biteoftech.com. Or if you go to our website, infectionpodcast.com, which is not AI generated, you can go to the upper right-hand side and join our server on Discord. We have 11 ARC servers running there. We have Conan Exile server running. You're more than welcome to jump in and play. When you join the server, it'll ask you if you want to be a part of the ARC community or part of the politics community, but you're more than welcome to come in and hang out. If you want to get a hold of Nick or I, that's a great place to do it. Or post a link in the show news chat. Maybe there's an article that you found that might be a good addition to this whole story, then go ahead and post a link to it in the show news, and we'll review that before the live show starts. If you want to watch the show, you can do that through Twitch or YouTube, or after the fact on Rumble, or listen to it after the fact and a lot of the different podcast platforms that are available on the lower right. Whatever one is most convenient for you, go ahead and click it, and we'll have a link right there so you can listen. If you are listening, that means by that point the show has been uploaded and the show notes are on the website, and we'll have a video and audio player built into that page, and you can go and reference links. Perhaps there's a video, or maybe that AI video, you want to go check that out that we showed a little bit of today. Go ahead and jump in there, and you can view that. There's source material, and everything that we referenced throughout the live show is right there. So if you want to support us, there's the support menu option up top, or infectionpodcast.com/support.
Absolutely. Want to thank our friend Donnie PC Games for hitting us up with the resubscription here during the show. Donnie, greatly appreciate my man. Hope all is well over there. All right, Brian. Well, it seems like it's going to be a week, but it will be just a couple of short days until we're back Tuesday again for the live episode. So same bat place, same bat time next week. We'll be back on our regular Tuesday schedule. Brian, thanks as always. We'll catch up with you next week.
We'll see you then. Thank you.
All right, well, if you want to follow me, you can check me out on Twitter at Nicholas M. Craig. If you're on Threads, which is Instagram's brand new Twitter alternative, which launched like an hour or so ago, you can follow me there. It's the same name, at Nicholas M. Craig as well. And, of course, if you miss any portion of our program, the best place always to go to is infectionpodcast.com. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.